Subscribe to TalesFlix for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Truman Larson learned 3 truths in 20 years of Army intelligence. Patience wins wars, information is the ultimate weapon, and evil men believe they're untouchable, right up until the instant they're not. He left that life 12 years ago. No more briefs in windowless rooms. No more flight manifests stamped classified. Instead, he runs Larson Security out of a sunlit office in downtown Portland. A modest business with steady corporate clients and a calendar that lets him make dinner most nights. His reputation is enough. The pension is a cushion. The house in Beaverton is the point. A quiet street, a strong school district, space for Amber's pottery studio in the converted garage, pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe where they measured their daughter's height every birthday. "Dad, I'm heading out." Karina calls from the entryway. She's 21, her mother's striking features, her father's refusal to quit. Political science and journalism at PSU. She wants to change the world. He knows she will. "Text when you're headed home," Truman says without looking up from a background check that'll keep a client out of trouble. "Always do, old man," she teases. Amber appears, forearms dusted with clay. "Be safe, sweetheart." They had met at a gallery back when everything felt like it might be possible. Truman had watched Amber dismantle a pretentious critic with grace and steel, and he'd known he was done for. Her family history was a mosaic. Mexican parents who came north when she was an infant. Sicilian roots that stayed behind in the person of her maternal uncle, Bruno, import-export, the family always said. He'd flown in twice, both for weddings. People had made room for him without being asked. "You're thinking," Amber says. "Just grateful," he admits. "We built something good." She squeezes his hand. "We did." They don't know these are the last quiet minutes they'll have for a long time. The call comes at 1:47 a.m. Truman is awake before he knows why. A wrong ring in a wrong hour slams him into the past. "This is Dr. Patel at Emmanuel Hospital," the voice says. "Your daughter, Karina, was brought into the ED approximately 40 minutes ago. She's stable, but you should come immediately." The drive is a blur of streetlights and breath held too long. Amber is a statue beside him, knuckles bone white. He calls Coleman Foster, his brother-in-arms since basic, now a Portland PD detective and Karina's godfather. "I'm on it," Coleman says. "I'll meet you there." The fluorescent wash of the ER makes ghosts of everyone. A nurse walks them back without making them wait. Never a good sign. Dr. Patel meets them with a practiced gentleness that makes Truman's chest burn. "Your daughter was assaulted," she says. "Concussion. Broken nose. 3 cracked ribs. Bruising. Defensive wounds. We've completed." Truman stops hearing. He's aware of Amber's hand crushing his arm, of Dr. Patel's mouth moving, of a low roaring that swallows language whole. Through the glass, Karina lies small and fierce in a bed that dwarfs her. One eye swollen shut, lips split, face stained with the aftermath. "Can we see her?" Amber whispers. Karina opens her good eye when they enter. "Mom, Dad." Her voice is shredded but steady. "I'm okay." Amber breaks then, carefully, softly, like a dam opening with grace. Truman stands and feels something he's never felt in combat. Useless. Who did this? His voice is ironed flat. Karina locks onto him. Stanford Phelps. The name means nothing to him now. It will soon mean everything. She tells the story in stops and starts through pain. A fundraiser, a charming donor, a dinner that becomes a penthouse because the view is better, a price demanded for his generosity. She refused. He didn't. She fought and screamed and a doorman called 911. She got out. Barely. He wasn't scared, she says, breath hitching. Even when the ambulance came. He just said his father would handle it. Coleman arrives 20 minutes later, eyes grim above the badge on his belt. Stanford Phelps, 26, he says in the hallway. Only son of Robert Phelps, the developer. Worth billions. Stanford's got a record that never stuck. 3 prior assault allegations withdrawn. DUIs that evaporated. A case 2 years ago that vanished. How is that possible? Amber asks, voice raw. Robert Phelps owns half the city council and funds the DA's campaigns. His lawyers have lawyers. Coleman's jaw tightens. Uniforms responded. His attorney was already there. By the time I found out and made calls, Stanford was home. No arrest. DA says insufficient evidence. My daughter is in a hospital bed with a broken face, Truman says. I know, Coleman says. And I hate this. But this is bigger than my badge. Truman goes very still. Then I'll handle it. True, Coleman says, warning and plea in one word. Thank you for trying, Cole, Truman says. But this is family now. His phone buzzes. An unknown number. A message. She refused to spend a night with me. My dad owns this city. You can't touch me. He shows Amber. Her shock goes pale, then hardens to something with edges. Call him, she says. Call Bruno. Truman dials at 4 in the morning from the hospital parking lot. 4 rings, then a voice like gravel and thunder. I remember who you are, Bruno Moreno says. Why do you call at this hour? Truman tells him everything. He keeps it clinical because that's how you hold when everything wants to come apart. When he's done, there's a long silence. Karina is my blood, Bruno says. You are family. I arrive tomorrow. Do nothing until I get there. Bruno. In my world, Bruno says, iron under silk. Vengeance poured hot only scalds the hand that serves it. You are angry. Good. But anger makes men sloppy. Wait. By dusk the next day, Karina is steady enough to glare at the TV when the news shows Stanford's grin in a cropped tux photo. Amber goes home to sleep. Truman opens his laptop and digs. The kids' social feeds are a temple to arrogance. Yachts and velvet ropes and faces he doesn't bother to remember. Princeton without a diploma. A nebulous executive role at Dad's company. Robert Phelps is easier to find. Press photos and ribbon cuttings and a gleaming narrative of a self-made empire. In the margins lurk shadows, legal settlements, permits that never should have passed, competitors who mysteriously lost funding. Coleman calls. Off the record. Stanford gave a 5-minute statement before his lawyers shut it down. Says it was consensual and your daughter got upset when he wouldn't fund her cause. Filed a counterclaim. Says she tried to extort him. Truman's knuckles turn white. He's going to sue us. It's pressure. Designed to make you go quiet. He doesn't know me, Truman says. Bruno arrives at 6. No caricature in a silk shirt. Just a lean 72-year-old in an immaculate suit and eyes that miss nothing. He sits by Karina's bed without speaking. He takes her hand and says something soft in Italian that sounds like a vow. Then he looks at Truman. Now we talk. In the corner booth of a diner that hasn't changed in 50 years, Truman lays it out. The corruption. The history. The recording. Karina's quiet act of foresight before she walked into a trap. The recording is your ace, Bruno says. Played in their courts, it will be buried. We will not play in their court. I'm listening. Robert Phelps is a disease with many symptoms, Bruno says. We gather the people he hurt. We make them one body. And we use your daughter's truth not only to expose the son, but to bring down the father's protection. We do not shoot. We do not shout. We press. We apply weight. And then, when the shield breaks, we take the boy without noise. It'll take time, Truman says. Good things do, Bruno replies. Your daughter heals. You build. I make calls. Truman's heart finds purchase again. A mission. Objectives. A map. What do you need? Everything, Bruno says. Every shell company. Every favor owed. Find the cracks. I will find the men with the hammers. Karina comes home 3 days later, slow but stubborn. The house goes quiet, careful. Amber takes leave from teaching and moves like a sentinel between the studio and her daughter's door. Truman transforms his office into a war room. Bruno arrives each morning with espresso and disappears at odd hours to take calls in a language Truman doesn't speak. By midweek, Bruno spreads names across the desk like a high priest casting bones. Eric Ford, he says. Former councilman. Phelps destroyed him when he said no. Harvey Moran, he says next. Contractor. Bankrupted after Phelps muscled into his biggest project. Andreas Wright, he finishes. Journalist who tried to write the truth and got sued into silence. Together, Bruno says, these men are a fuse. Truman's own board fills with string and photos. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, officials whose campaigns shine suspiciously bright. He finds patterns. He finds rot. Karina knocks at dusk, eyes clearer. I need to tell you something, she says. When he changed the location, I hit record. The audio backs up to the cloud. Coleman says evidence like that gets lost, she adds, if it goes into the wrong hands. Truman calls Coleman. It exists, he says. Don't file it yet. True, that's evidence, Coleman answers. I can't sit on it. You can be strategic, Truman says. Give me 24 hours. Then do what you have to do. Coleman is quiet. 24. Truman starts making calls. The first woman hangs up when he says Stanford's name. The second doesn't. By the end of the week, he's spoken to 7. Their stories rhyme. A room that wasn't the promised restaurant. A proposition dressed as philanthropy. A bruised morning followed by a lawyer and an NDA. They won't go public. Not yet. But they give him dates. Names. Context. The pattern draws itself. It's not enough, Coleman says, flipping Truman's notes. Without testimony. We have the recording, Truman says. Then we decide how to use it, Bruno says, stepping in. Not as evidence. As truth. Truth moves faster. A date presents itself. The annual charity gala at Phelps Tower. Politicians. Cameras. Everyone who matters under one roof. You want to crash it? Coleman asks. We want to end it, Truman says. Friday arrives cold and rainy. The tower glows blue against the Willamette like a monolith. Limousines disgorge sequins and tuxedos under black umbrellas. Inside, there's a champagne fountain engineered to reassure the wealthy that generosity looks like a sparkling photo. Outside, the other story gathers. Families displaced by development. Workers stiffed on pay. Neighbors whose communities were paved into opportunity zones. They carry signs that say Phelps evicts. Phelps lies. Phelps profits. The crowd swells past 300. News vans arrive. Optics, Bruno murmurs, satisfied. Inside, Truman and Bruno pass through security like they belong. They do, for now. Robert Phelps holds court near the bar, silver hair and a ringmaster's smile. Stanford preens at his elbow, a champagne flute and a laugh ready for the next camera. Truman's hands want to close into fists. Bruno's brief touch on his sleeve is a leash he's grateful for. Patience, Bruno says. The trap is already sprung. At 8 o'clock, phones buzz in synchronized tremors. Andreas's thread goes live, a clean, careful story of a corrupt empire and the people ground underneath it. Scanned permits. Mysterious transfers. Statements in black and white that refuse to be ignored. He's also primed a dozen journalists to hit publish at once. They do. Near the bar, someone shows Robert a screen. The ringmaster's smile fractures. Stanford checks his own phone and that familiar entitled ease drains away. Eric Ford crosses the room with a tablet and the calm of a man who's finally found leverage. He leans into old colleagues, whispers, "Let's documents speak." Spines stiffen and faces go pale. Alliances start dissolving mid-conversation. At 8:15, Harvey releases his report on the building they're standing in. Violations documented, corners cut, inspectors who should lose their jobs. Newsrooms eat it in gulps. A reporter outside says into the camera, there are questions tonight about the safety of Phelps Tower itself. By 8:30, the music's still playing but the party is over. Half the room has slipped into the rain. The other half are on their phones. Protest chants are audible through the glass. Robert is red-faced, barking orders. The people who needed him yesterday won't meet his eyes. Now, Bruno says. He doesn't need to say what now means. Coleman's message hits Truman's phone. FBI incoming. Clean agent. 10 minutes. Bruno unlocks his screen and nods. Karina's recording is cued. She gave consent to blast it everywhere at once. Not the courts. The court of everyone. Do it, Truman says. Seconds later, the internet hears Karina's voice. Cautious, steady, refusing. Then Stanford's voice, honey-curdled to something dangerous. A scuffle. Furniture. Karina shouting for help. Stanford laughing like none of it matters. It's 8 minutes of truth that won't be put back in a bottle. Across the room, Stanford goes bloodless as the audio finds him. Robert clamps a hand around his son's arm and hauls him toward a private elevator, only to walk into a wave of Navy windbreakers and federal warrants. Robert Phelps, an agent, says, authority flat and practiced. We have a warrant to seize records related to Phelps Development's business practices. We're opening investigations into fraud, bribery, and racketeering. Robert sputters something about lawyers. The agent shows him the seal. The room stops pretending to be a party and becomes a crime scene. Stanford panics. He bolts, not toward the elevator but for the stairwell, shoving through Crystal and panic. No one stops him. No one helps. Garage, Coleman says in Truman's ear, his voice the calm in a storm they made. Truman takes the stairs 2 at a time, Bruno a shadow behind him. The concrete echoes with the frantic slap of dress shoes. Stanford hits the garage and looks for a car that isn't going to save him. Stanford, Truman says. The kid jerks, feral eyes in a corner. Up close, the veneer peels. He's just frightened and ugly. Stay away, Stanford says. My father is busy, Truman says. And broke. And losing his phone privileges. What do you want? Stanford asks, voice cracking. Consequences, Truman says. Legal ones. Social ones. Personal ones. All of them. I'll pay, Stanford blurts. I'll donate. The only check you're writing is your statement of guilt, Truman says. Bruno arrives at Stanford's back, casual death in a tailored suit. He doesn't touch him. He doesn't have to. In Sicily, Bruno says conversationally, when a man harms a daughter of the family, there is an old remedy. Very simple. Very permanent. Stanford's legs give. He drops to his knees on cold concrete. For once in his life, he understands the word no. Let's go, Truman says. He isn't worth another second. They leave Stanford sobbing in a garage that smells like oil and the end of things. He will be taken into custody by Portland PD. Shivering, incoherent, suddenly very small. The internet will spend the night learning his name in a way he can never undo. The fallout arrives like a weather front. The FBI seizes servers and files. The DA, who used to dodge inconvenient cases, calls a press conference to promise she won't this time. Politicians return donations they accepted with 2 hands. Robert Phelps stands in front of a camera and calls it a misunderstanding while his attorneys build lifeboats. Stanford is charged. Bail is set higher than he can reach now that assets are frozen. He's put in protective custody for his own safety. Karina's statement airs on the evening news. She refuses anonymity. I won't be ashamed for surviving, she says. He should be ashamed for what he did. 9 more women come forward before the weekend is over. A pattern becomes a wall. And yet, power moves in strange ways. Andreas calls with a thread he shouldn't have but does. Quiet transfers overseas. Money sliding beyond the reach of seizure orders. Coleman confirms the whispers becoming words. Federal prosecutors want what Robert can give them. Names, documents, a map of corruption going higher than anyone realized. Deals are discussed in rooms without windows. There's risk that Stanford's conviction becomes a bargaining chip in a larger game. Truman feels cold settle in his bones. He walks through the house of the life he built and hears his daughter's breath down the hall and understands the law might break right where they need it to hold. Bruno pours him a measured whiskey. The boy will go to prison, Bruno says. Or he might slip between the bars. You have a choice. You can accept their version of justice. Or you can ensure he never harms another woman. You're talking about murder, Truman says. I'm talking about finality, Bruno replies. That night, Karina sits beside her father at the dining table where she did second-grade math and where they celebrated her acceptance letter to PSU. I know you and Uncle Bruno are talking, she says. I know what that means. Karina. If the system lets him hurt anyone else, she says, voice steady, I want someone to stop him. Permanently. I don't want another father standing where you are, wishing he'd done more. He looks at her and feels the weight rearrange itself. This isn't revenge. It's prevention with a blade's edge. He doesn't sleep. He doesn't need to. By morning, he knows what he's going to do. The plan isn't a movie. It's quiet. It's careful. It's what happens when people who understand systems find the soft places where oversight thins the way it does everywhere. Stanford is under protective watch, separated from the general population. There's an infirmary. There are staffers. Not everyone in the world is for sale, but enough are tired of watching men like this skate. I have someone who has someone, Bruno says. You will not be there. You will watch. I want to see, Truman says. If I choose this, I own it. At 8 that night, in an anonymous storage unit, a laptop shows a grainy black and white view of a narrow room. A bed, a monitor, a doorway. Stanford lies staring at a ceiling he can't buy. He looks 26 and suddenly very young. Like the first time in his life, he wasn't sure how the next 5 minutes would go. Truman stands with his hands flat on the table. He doesn't drink the whiskey Bruno offers. Time slows. A nurse enters, glove snap professional, checks vitals, adjusts a line. The feed carries no sound. It doesn't need to. There's a moment where choice still exists, like a door a man could walk through if he wanted. Truman thinks about his daughter's face in that hospital bed. He thinks about apologies that only come when someone is cornered. He thinks about the gap between what the law can do and what the world sometimes requires from the people who live in it. The moment passes. The nurse finishes her check and exits. A minute later, alarm strobes soft light. The monitor traces a jagged panic and then a long, unbroken line. Staff rush in. They try. They fail. Truman watches without moving and understands that this is what finality looks like. Not a gunshot, not a shout, just a life that was a weapon becoming a life that's over. It's done, Bruno says gently. Truman breathes like he's been underwater. He feels, not triumph, not horror, something colder, something simpler, a problem removed. This changes you, Bruno says on the drive back into the sleeping city. Watch for the darkness. Don't invite it to stay. Amber is waiting in the quiet house. She doesn't ask for details. She asks for a promise. This is the last time, she says. It is, he says, and means it. The news reports a sudden cardiac event consistent with stress in a young adult. The medical examiner finds no reason to doubt it. An investigation opens. It closes. Stanford Phelps's face beams from a framed photo at a memorial where people say he was complicated, and then the world moves on. Robert Phelps does not. He loses everything but his pulse. He trades secrets for leniency, names for years off his sentence. The empire dissolves. The courts claim their victories. 32 officials are implicated. A mayor resigns. The DA is indicted. The governor announces she won't run again. A city begins the painful work of scraping away rot. In the Larson house, the pencil marks on the kitchen doorframe remain. Amber throws herself into teaching, clay spinning under her hands, creating vessels that look like strength formed around fractures. Karina heals and then sharpens. She goes on television with her face and her name and refuses to stand in the shadows. She speaks on campuses. She sits on panels. She says the words out loud so someone else can hear them and believe they're not alone. I think law school, she tells her father over breakfast one morning. I want to fight in rooms where rules are written. You'll be unstoppable, he says. He means it. Coleman gets a promotion he didn't ask for and meets Truman for coffee every Friday, where they talk about the Trailblazers and the price of gas. They don't talk about a garage patrol that ended in a man on his knees. They don't talk about a flat line on a monitor in a room with no audio. Some things don't need words to be understood. Bruno stays just long enough to make sure all the right files end up on all the right desks and all the wrong questions fail to find traction. He stops by the house with his leather bag at his side and kisses Karina's cheek like a blessing. "Family is everything," he says. "Never forget." At the door, he gives Truman a look that's both warning and affection. "You did what needed doing. Now be careful with who that makes you." Truman stands on the porch long after the taillights disappear. The cul-de-sac is the same. He is not. He tests the new shape of himself and finds it functional. A man who found the line he wouldn't cross and stepped over it anyway for a reason he can live with. Months later, an unknown number pings his phone. "Thank you," it says. A link follows, a scholarship in Stanford's name funded by women he hurt, a reclamation, money turned into a lifeline for survivors. "We're making something good out of it," the message reads. "I don't know what happened in that jail, but I know you moved mountains. Thank you for believing us when the system didn't." Truman deletes the message. No trail. But he allows himself a small, private smile for exactly 3 seconds before he goes back to a routine background check that will help a client hire a CFO who won't embezzle a dime. That evening, Amber is in the studio, hands inside a spinning cylinder, pulling it upward. Music plays low. Karina is upstairs, LSAT prep on the desk, hope in her posture. Truman stands in the doorway and watches the love he risked everything to protect. Shadows don't scare him now. They remind him where the light is. Some men need stopping. Some fathers will do what needs doing. The world is safer because of it. The Larsons are whole. This story is complete, unless you want more. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for spending your time with TalesFlix. If you enjoyed this, subscribe for more stories, and I'll see you in the next one.